broadcasting from the studios of AM 950 KTNF, the progressive voice of Minnesota, and airing on WCPTA 20 Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter. Welcome to The Gaily Show, the only daily LGBTQ radio news and talk show in the United States. I am your host, John Parker. Today is our weekly Thinking Clearly, Thinking Queerly episode, where we sit down with a guest for the episode to help us think more clearly and more queerly on the issues of the day facing the LGBTQ and allied community. Coming up after us, get ready for the best in progressive news and analysis, because there's a lot going on with the Matt McNeil Show on AM 950 KTNF and Choose Views with Richard Chu on WCPT. Today, my guest is a singer-songwriter, actor, and contestant on the first season of American Idol, placing 9th. His debut album was Roller Coaster, released in 2005 by Coke Records, now MNRK Music Group, which is the home of Snoop Dogg, Kitty, and Keke Palmer. As an actor, he starred in the, dare I say it, cult classic Eating Out and its sequel. In 2006, he was listed as 30 under 30 by Windy City Times and the first former contestant on American Idol to come out as gay. He dropped his second album in 2011, Do Not Disturb. Last year, he released the single Pyramid. In its review, QWERTY wrote another single proving he still got all it takes to be a superstar. And now, 14 years after his debut album, his newest album, Explicit, is out August 8th on all of your favorite streaming platforms. Instinct Magazine wrote that Explicit is a, quote, stunning return to form. It's also a coming home for musician, both blessed and damned to be ahead of his time. Jim Verraros, welcome to The Gaily Show.
That was a hell of an intro. I was like, did I do all those things? Wow. Thanks, John. Thanks for having me. That was amazing.
For folks, that was only a partial bio. So it was really fun digging into your career for this conversation. And all right, it's been 14 years. Let's start with Explicit. Tell us about it.
I think that part of the inspiration behind coming back into music, in general, was the just incredible wave of this, queer talent, right? That is in media and television and, in film and music, right? And so I think it just made me sort of feel like maybe now is sort of a new time for me to come back out. And I think people need to kind of just get perspective on when I put out my album. Idol was, 2002, so 23 years ago. Rosie O'Donnell and I came out right at the same time. Ellen DeGeneres was like 4 years before me. So it was really, such a rare time. I mean, Rufus McBride, Katie Lang, I think around that time as well. There just wasn't a lot there for either me to kind of sort of say, hey, I'm going to go after that manager because they're handling, that artist, and I'm going to try and, go down that path. So a lot of it was trial and error. And I think now seeing the success of Chappell Roan, obviously Adam Lambert, but continuing his career as well. Lil Nas X, Sam Smith, right? And then the list just keeps kind of going on. And they're having mainstream success. And so I think the sexuality part of it has really kind of not become such this taboo, topic that was 20 years ago. And so that really sort of opened the door for me. And I was really inspired to come back to it. I mean, I'm 42. I've been married twice. I mean, the jig is up. I'm not coming from the Disney Channel where I'm trying to be super safe and vanilla, right? So I think it was really kind of befitting to call it explicit, not in terms of the content, but just in the terms of freedom of expression, right? Freedom without inhibition or censorship. So that's kind of where I was inspired to come back into music.
This is why I wanted to have you on our Thinking Clearly, Thinking Queerly episode, because of where you were historically speaking in the media, the national media in the early aughts, which, as you were mentioning, was a fraught experience for folks. But first, Patrick, our producer in the control room, can we play our first clip of the track Move On from the new album Explicit?
Maybe we go separate ways, baby. The time and place is getting hazy. things we do, the things we say, yeah. It's crazy. Tell me if I'm wrong about this. Honestly, can we keep all of our promises? Back and forth, we're running round in circles yet again. How can it be wrong if we feel right about it? I want you to want me too. I want you to want me too. Make it happen, breaking through.
That was Move On from the new album Explicit by Jim Verraros. Jim, tell us about making the album now after 14 years since your last one, making it, writing it, who you were choosing to work with on this album. Dish.
It all kind of happened very randomly. So I put out a single in 2023 called Take My Bow. And I think at that time, I was just like, do I be political? Do I talk about what's happening in the world? Because I just think we as queer artists sort of feel this responsibility to kind of address things that are harmful to us and to others, right? And I think if you have a platform to say something, most times you should, right? And so then I thought, well, what if I just kind of did something that was light and maybe something to escape, the shit that, we're all kind of facing right now. And so that was kind of my other decision to do it. And so I just wanted something kind of edgy and, and sexy. And I teamed up with this incredible songwriter, Jace Green, who is unreal, out of Oklahoma City. And that was just through a connection I had made via Instagram. And I remember us getting on a phone call and very Gen Z. I mean, they're 23. So I felt especially just old as hell. But I learned so much from them because, Jace had this incredible approach to songwriting. And so we would just be talking, right, for an hour. And then Jace would show me these 2 pages just filled with all of these things that I just said. And then they'd circle sort of words that I kept coming back to. And all of a sudden, just through that, we sort of had this song called Take My Bow, which is really about not being ready for you then, but being ready now, right? And sort of coming into yourself and, not really taking your bow as the end, but really like receiving those accolades that maybe at first you didn't feel like you were so worthy of. And the song was born, and I decided to kind of push it over, to the UK to see how it would sort of be received by, clubs and DJs and sort of dance promo. And it ended up hitting top 5 on their commercial pop chart. And I was on a chart with Kylie Minogue and Calvin Harris and Crystal Waters. And I was just like, okay, that's kind of cool. And it just sort of kind of kept going. We're like, well, maybe I should do another single.
Yeah.
And then Pyramid, which is about a threesome, came about. And then I was like, okay, that did also pretty well. And then I was like, let's just do an EP. Let's do like a little baby album, right? It doesn't have to be like this massive, thing, because it's expensive, right? If you are doing this independently, and unless you're Beyonce or Taylor Swift, where you're, making billions on streams, it's like 0.3 of a penny to artists. So if you're doing it for the money, go find another industry, because it ain't happening. At least not in the beginning. So I think for me, it was just like, what would something sound like from me now, right? And I think pulling it from inspirations, just growing up into now and just life experience, right? And, pop music has always been at the center, I think, of my childhood, my growing up, what I usually kind of gravitate towards. And I think I always say this to people when they say, what does it sound like? And I say, well, if you have Britney Spears and George Michael and Justin Timberlake, and they're in a throuple, like what would be like my sound, basically. So that's like the best thing I can say to kind of describe it. So,
well, let's play a clip from Take My Bow, Patrick, if you've got that lined up for us, from the new album Explicit by Jim Verraros.
I've been having nightmares, think I kinda like it. Watch me on your TV, but you think of me in private. I could be a movie, I could be a love scene, baby, if you let me. Oh, I could be your starlet, I could be your harlot. I could be the skeleton you're keeping in your closet. I could be your dirty, dirty little secret. Baby, can you keep it? Oh, my skin is thick enough. I don't have to fake it.
I'm feeling like an old school DJ right now,
I
like
know,
lining up and playing it. I love it.
Love it.
All right. So I want to come back to the idea of queer joy because we're in a fight right
Yeah.
now on all fronts, everywhere, all at once.
Yeah.
And I was talking to a person last week that was like, yeah, we got to fight because he was studying ACT UP from the 80s.
Yeah.
And he said, yes, there was the fight during the day, but people went home and made music and had sex and had joy. And so tell me more about this idea of queer joy for you right now, because that is resistance in and of itself.
100%. I think this is where we need to be as loud as humanly possible. And this is where I personally sort of struggle with the time that we're in, because I don't want to be naive, right? I don't want to shut off all of it, because it's very easy to do if you're trying to protect yourself and to protect your sanity. And then it's also very easy to doom scroll and just start to get angrier and angrier, or start to chase these trolls that you have no relationship to, but that's what they want. And, I think that there are also examples in queer media of clickbait, and, I wish it wasn't about that. But when you look at media as a whole and journalism as a whole, it's an art that I think is slowly kind of dying, right? There are so many incredibly talented journalists out there that are struggling to make a living, because media in itself there's so many budgets being cut, and people are wearing multiple hats at these massive, publications, and they're trying to do so much more with so much less. So for me personally, I'm not perfect. I'm human. And there will be times when I want to, break a wall. But I think when we think about joy and happiness, right? I'm always taken back to my childhood, and I talk about this because LL Cool J, I know a random.
Ooh, this sounds good. This sounds good. And I have to fit in a break here real quick, but let's pick it up with LL Cool J. When we come back, more with Jim Verraros on the flip side. You're listening to The Gaily Show on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk, and AM 950 KTNF, the progressive voice of Minnesota. Welcome back to The Gaily Show. I'm John Parker. We are already coming up on the bottom of the hour. This is our weekly Thinking Clearly, Thinking Queerly episode, where we sit down with a guest for the episode to take a deep dive into issues facing the LGBTQ and allied community. My guest is LGBTQ trailblazer and singer-songwriter and actor Jim Verraros, who has a new album, Explicit, out on August 8th. Okay, you were talking about queer joy before the break and LL Cool J. Let's pick it up there.
LL Cool J once said, "Dreams don't have deadlines." And that quote really, really stuck with me, because going back to when we were all kids, right, there were things that we were very organically drawn to, right? Whether it was the theater, the stage, whether it was chorus or band, whether it was, sketching or sculpting, whatever those things were, before we were jaded, right? Before anything even mattered around us, we were drawn to those things. And then as we get older, life changes, it gets busy, we have kids, we have partners, we get married, right? And so we lose sight of those things. And I think that all of us need more than just being a partner, a son, a father, right? We need something for us. And so I used to be a competitive gymnast for years. I was the only male on an all-female team, because there weren't enough men when I was young that really were interested in it. And I find myself going to like an open gym here in the city in Chicago and just tumbling. And it's a connection that I think brings me a lot of joy and a lot of great memories. And so it's little things like that I think all of us kind of need to revisit. And it's not always easy, right? Because sometimes it's just not possible for us because we're working full time and we've got kids or whatever it is. But if you can take a moment sometime to kind of revisit the things that made you happy, the things that you were so drawn to, that you did with just full joy and full happiness. Those are the things that matter right now. And we can only control what we can control. So that is where I think we can be our absolute best. Yes, protest. Yes, get on the streets. Yes, make sure you are registered to vote, and then pull 10 fucking people with you, right? All of those things. But also, don't forget about you, and don't forget about the things that keep you sane. So
I agree with the sentiment. Just have to mention FCC regulations.
Sorry about that.
No, you're good. You're good for the rest of the episode. Another theme of your album is expressing freedom. And something on the top of all of our minds this year. And I found a conversation you had with Out South Florida last year where you were talking about the photo shoot for Take My Bow, and you said, quote, "There's nothing more freeing than taking a picture on a jock strap in a club."
Totally.
But unpack for us the idea of freedom that you're trying to express here in this album.
I think it's just a culmination of not being afraid to discuss certain topics, right? I mean, I think I think a lot of times when we're younger in music, we're trying to sell to or appeal to as many different people as possible, right? Because at the end of the day, it's sales, right? Is how many copies of your album can you sell? Because it's just numbers. It's a business. So back then, when I had first put out my album in 2005, I was a little bit more conscious of having something that appealed to everybody, right? And keeping lyrics very sort of genderless, even though I had come out publicly and all of that. I think it was all just about not forgetting about an entire fan base, right? And so I think now none of that matters anymore. And I think if you love someone, you love them, and whether they're talking about a man or a woman or whoever it may be, I think it comes down to the music, it comes down to the artistry, it comes down to your connection with that person. And so explicit, not so much about the content, but having the freedom to talk about sex, having the freedom to talk about deep personal things, having the freedom to just be so like uninhibited, right? Not think twice, don't pause, right? Just to kind of sing it, as it is in its authentic, real moment. And that's what I love about being 42 and coming to the table with so much more life experience than I had in my 20s. So that's sort of where it comes from.
I'm 44 and I could never do this show 20 years ago.
Great.
And, but so the idea where I'm going with that is the idea of being able to be behind a microphone on the radio, talking about queer stuff.
Yeah.
Is, at a time also, you're mentioning, being free and having free speech when they're all trying to take away our free speech. Talking about younger selves, though.
Yeah.
In an interview that you gave with Windy City Times this year on the theme of success, you said, if I could go back in time and tell my 18-year-old self, you said, quote, "Success is not a tangible thing. It's how you feel." Unpack that for us, the idea of success, because we're all still trying to figure what that means as queer people.
Yeah, it's so true. I think the first thing to know is that success is different for everybody. So everyone has their own version of that.
Yeah.
But it can also be an emotion, right? I think when you're content and you're in a loving, healthy relationship, when you have a job that gives you job security and financial, freedom, when you have a great group of friends that love you and support you and that have been consistent rocks throughout your life, when you step back and you look at those things, although it may sound very simple, that can be very successful, right? And I think for me, growing up, having two deaf parents, I had been around adults very young. At 4, I would be sort of tapped as their interpreter, right? To any, doctor appointment. If it was an attorney, it was an accountant to do their taxes, right? Very adult level things that I just didn't know any better. Like that was just my life, right? So, when it comes to success, it was, go to college, get an education, get a full-time job, get married, right? You have that sort of white picket fence success sort of painted, right? And when Idol happened for me, my whole world just shifted because now it became now that the goalpost was way out there now, right? Because now I was like, okay, well, Kelly Clarkson has a record deal, Justin has a record deal, Nikki just got signed, Tamira has so in that sense, I was, how do I succeed when I was number 9 and they had so much exposure, right? And they were doing Old Navy commercials and they were doing all these Ford Focus commercials, and I was just, I was 9th, so I didn't get the breadth of exposure that they had, and I was gay on top of it. So I was like, okay, success is get a record deal. And when I finally got that in 2005, it was, okay, now how many copies are you going to sell?
Right.
Okay, how much is it going to cost to fund a music video? Okay, so get a movie done, right? And how many tickets were bought? How many people bought the DVD? And so it's just that the goalpost, when you're in entertainment, it can be very easy to be caught up in all of that. I mean, comparison is the thief of all joy, right? Like, I think social media is sort of like the devil, because you almost feel like you're never good enough and you're not doing enough because this person's doing so much more, right? But no one's posting photos of people crying, in fetal position, like underneath their desk, because we don't want to see that. But I kind of think we should, right? So
we are here with multi-hyphenate singer, songwriter, and actor Jim Verraros, whose new album Explicit is out on all streaming platforms August 8th. We're going to have more with Jim after this break. You're listening to The Gaily Show. Patrick, hang on. Coming to you from the studios of AM 950 KTNF, the progressive voice of Minnesota, and airing on WCPTA 20, Chicago's Progressive Talk. Welcome back to The Gaily Show. I'm John Parker. It is 33 minutes after the hour. It's our weekly Thinking Clearly, Thinking Queerly episode, where we sit down with a guest for the episode to help us think more clearly on major issues of the day facing the LGBTQ and allied community. With me today is Jim Verraros. Jim is a singer, songwriter, actor, and contestant on the first season of American Idol, placing 9th overall. His debut album was Roller Coaster, released in 2005. As an actor, he starred in Eating Out and its sequel. In 2006, he was listed as 30 Under 30 by Windy City Times. On August 8th, his newest album, Explicit, is available on all streaming platforms. Okay, do you mind talking about a little Idol?
Yeah, let's do it. Whatever you want.
Last year, Rolling Stone had a pretty in-depth article about Idol. Headline: LGBTQ plus contestants say American Idol failed them.
Yeah,
which was like, wait, what? And I remember when Idol came out, and I was in my early 20s, and I was working at a TV station in Northwest Lower Michigan. It was an NBC affiliate, and it was all Idol. And I just remember thinking, like, this seems kind of mean. That Simon character, I don't know how I feel about him. Mm-hmm. So I was reading the article, and they were talking about, how you were sort of recast from who you were as this, gay Midwestern kid into something completely different, like leather cuff bracelets and sort of a generic rock look. Tell us about that transformation that was... was it being forced on you? I want to know more about that time. Like, how are you navigating, and how are they navigating you as a contestant?
It's almost the whole thing. I think when you come from a small town, you like, that's not supposed to happen, right? Those things just don't happen to you. And I think looking back, it was just so bizarre, because even I will never forget, John, going to the very first audition, right? It was at a hotel in Chicago. And I walk in the hotel, there's nobody there. There's not a single person waiting in line. I find someone wearing like a headset with a microphone, and she says, just have a seat. We're just waiting for more people to come. And I was like, okay. Sat down, and then 4 guys showed up. They put us in this room with literal duct tape on the floor and like a porn camcorder on a tripod, right? Like in the front of the room. And you're like, what is happening? What is this? And they tell you to say your name, where you're from, do a little ditty, right? And then you're done. And then they were like, hey, Jim, can you do something a little more pop, right? Because I was just like, I don't want to do like the boy band thing. I just wanted to like be more jazz and more bluesy and all of that. And so then I sang something more pop, and they were like, great, thanks. And then they kind of seat you outside, and they sort of do this interview with you where they say, you know, tell us something about you that no one would know just by looking at you. And I said, well, my parents are both deaf, right? So I know sign language. That's just, you know, and I was just like kind of just saying my life, and I didn't really think about it at the time. And it was just sort of like I could see her eyes get really big, and it was like they had found the person with like the story, right? I think from day one at that point, I think that they have this general idea of who they need or who they want, and sort of they want those molds, and they kind of want to bring it all together to bring in as many viewers as possible, right? And I was the sympathy, you know, vote. And to me, I just didn't get it because there was nothing to feel bad for. Like, this was not anything. It was just sort of like, oh, Jim's a singer. His parents will never hear him. But I mean, it just sort of kind of spun, right? So when I was eliminated before I had the chance to even have my audition air to America, I was devastated because it was this random rule that they just decided at that time that the judges could just cut someone without America getting to see their audition. And I remember when that happened, I sort of was just sort of like looking around, and the cameras were just like waiting to see, like capture the reaction of other people. And they used that as footage to kind of promote the next episode. And then they put me back in the competition. My audition airs and I make top 10. So I almost just felt kind of used, like in a way that, you know, because I had gotten really close to people, and I sort of didn't look at this sort of as a, you know, I'm going to be a pop star and like, I'm going to be like Hannah Montana, like that's going to be me, you know, it was never like that. I just went into it for the experience. You know, I was Broadway. I did a lot of musicals and a lot of theater growing up. So being a pop star was never, you know, in the realm of what I wanted, you know? So it just felt very off. And then, you know, just to talk to everybody, you know, after they're like, oh, you know, well, we just didn't feel it was fair to you that America didn't get a chance to, and I was like, I don't think that is the truth. And then just things after just really felt a little bit off. And Brian Dunkelman, who we love very much, and I really think got the short end of the stick just overall, but he really bonded with us and had a much closer relationship with us as contestants. Ryan Seacrest kind of more kept his distance, was a bit more just not cold, just a little bit more, you know, kept us at sort of arm's length. And
he was Ryan Seacrest.
I mean, listen, it is what it is. But it just so when I think about that time, it's like, yes, am I grateful for the things that came from it, from a producer that came to me and said, we're doing an album, you are good enough, and I'm going to produce this. And I was like, yes. To have Alan Broker reach out, you know, the writer of Eating Out, to say, here's the script. I think it'd be a great Kyle. Yes, of course. Like I love that those things came from that. And it was a big, you know, thank you to Idol for those things, but it also came with a price. You know, I was outed via the Globe, you know, this 2-page spread when I hadn't even told my father yet. And there's a price to pay for those things, right? So, and people will say, you know, even to this day, well, Jim, you knew what you were getting into. And but then I sort of and say, it was the first season. So I kind of didn't, you know, I knew about Pop Idol because it came from the UK.
Yeah.
And I knew Simon was like dubbed this like sort of mean guy, but I don't think you sign up for, you know, gay bashing and, you know, people ripping you to shreds. And keep in mind, we didn't have social media back then. We had nothing. We had message boards. So if someone was going to hate you, they had to like really find you on the message boards and find your name and click the season and click your name and add a like it was like they found you. They had to hunt you down to rip you apart, right? And so thank God I feel like we only had those, because if it were during a social media, you know, I would literally don't know how I would handle that. But it comes with a price, right? So if you are queer, if you come off effeminate, if you are expressive, which I am just from growing up with 2 deaf parents, you know, you're deemed as different. You're deemed as something's not right. And then they'll kind of use that a little bit to get, sort of people to talk about you and to engage and to hate you or love you, right? They didn't care. It was a matter of engagement and sponsorship and dollars, right? So it's like I had this like hate-love relationship with it. It's like, yes, I'm grateful, but also it wasn't the best time the whole time. So
I'm here with multi-hyphenate singer, songwriter, and actor Jim Verraros, whose new album Explicit is out on your favorite streamer on August 8th. Jim, the Rolling Stone, I mean, talk about, we're reporters and we try to find the right angle that's going to, get the clicks on the listeners. And they were very clearly making the argument in their article that you were targeted by producers, by Simon. Apparently he said that if you won, the whole show would have been a complete and utter failure.
Wow.
And did it feel like they were targeting you?
I don't think I stood there and I thought they're baiting me. I don't think that, you have to keep in mind when you are 19 years old and you don't understand this world of entertainment, like you are almost numb and you're kind of you're in this sort of haze and you're just sort of doing what you're told. And because you don't want to come off in a way that would hurt you from any chance of success. So you have that. So that was part of my brain, right? The other part of it was, don't be too gay because you don't want people to not vote for you. And so I just remember being very conscious of, if a camera was here, I was like an immediately different person. Like I would make sure I wasn't so flamboyant, or I would make sure that my hands maybe weren't so handy because I just talk with my hands a lot, or bring down my voice just a little bit deeper, right? A little bit lower. I just remember just being very aware, to the point where I learned this awful habit of holding my breath all the time. And not even now to this day, like I'll find myself just like holding my breath for no reason. And it started there. Like it started because I was so afraid that any part of my authentic self, any part of who I actually was, could hurt me on a national stage, right? So it's crazy because now I just feel like those things would have helped me, right? Like those things would have resonated so much more with people. And here I was just trying to sort of make it and survive. And so it was really challenging, because then you sort of spend, your 20s and your 30s sort of unlearning and unteaching these things that make you, right? Sort of going back into those like proverbial like drawers, taking those things that you put away and kind of putting them back into yourself. So it was this crash course of, yes, the entertainment industry, but it was this really, really harrowing experience of who you need to be where you're at. And nobody gives you a brochure or a blueprint on how to maneuver that, right? I think there was no mentorship. There was no guidance after Idol. It was just like, okay, season 2, 3, 4, 5. So I knew I had this very short window to go and pursue a career, to capitalize off of the success of our tour and being on the show and RCA Records and doing the Greatest Moments album with the top 10 of us. Like I knew it was just like, if you don't move, it's over. All the while having people tell me like, if you come out, it's over. Like it's over. So like, do not do it. And I was like, well, I'm outed. So
right,
I'm going to just do it because I'm 19. And what am I going to do? Go to the Abbey in LA and like bring a girl with me? It's like, I was like, stop. Like, why don't I just be a part of the solution? Right. Why don't I just say, hey, I did this much and I'm here and I'm queer and you can too, so I just decided to take on that responsibility.
It's history. You were out at a time in the early 2000s when you were mentioning earlier, there were so few people on the national media landscape that were out. I even remember when Will and Grace came out, Jack McFarlane, that was the character. Sean Hayes was like, no, I'm straight. And so it was a very fraught time you were navigating. And I'm just, I think that's where I'm sort of going with this, is I don't necessarily want to get into the drama and the salaciousness
Yeah.
of Idol, but I sort of want to, demonstrate to our listeners that you were there in the spotlight at a time where it was pretty hostile.
Yeah. Yeah. When you have people telling you that you cannot be you.
Yeah.
I remember just being told by this producer who just wanted me to play the good boy and the charming, like, don't be bitchy, don't be sassy, like, don't be, razor sharp like you are, like, just be very willing and able, like, just be easygoing. And so then you're sort of told, like, okay, well, this version of you doesn't work, so you're going to pick another one, and that's you, like, that's going to be you, and that's how you'll find success. And so that was really hard. People talk about LA and, the entertainment industry and it being so difficult as it is, but because of the landscape at the time, and I get it. Like, I'm not angry over it. I just think for the time, I understand why people would have said that to me, because they just wanted to protect me and they wanted me to have every opportunity. But it's just crazy to think about it now, because it's so different. But I did the best I could, with what I knew.
Well, we are very grateful for it. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to have more with Jim. We're going to play the full track of Move On from his album Explicit, out August 8th. Lots still to get to here on The Gailey Show on AM 950 KTNF, the progressive voice of Minnesota, and WCPT 820. To the Gailey Show. I'm John Parker. We're coming up on the top of the hour. LGBTQ history-making singer, songwriter, and actor Jim Verraros has a new album, Explicit. It is out on August 8th. We're going to close out the show with the full track of Move On. Jim, as you were saying that, I was thinking or remembering a quote from Adam Lambert when he was, observing that no out queer person has won Idol. That out meaning at the time of the competition, and in the entirety of the 21st century, we still only one person has ever been nominated for Best Actor at the Academy Awards.
Right.
Only one guy has ever been nominated out actor for Best Supporting Actor. Nobody in the MCU of all the getting films is out.
Yeah.
Right? And so I guess the question that I have there is the landscape is different clearly than 2002. And yet we still see these, like Pixar with Elio, they were like, no, the studio was like, we're going to get rid of all the gay references in this film. And I'm like, geez, that's going back to the early days of cinema. And so I wanted to ask you then, clearly it's different, but we still see these things that are just like, wow, what is it going to take to get rid of this? What is your take on that?
A new president. That's number one. So once this is the thing. This is not new for our community, right? To be a focus on what's negative and what's terrible, right? It's like people are focusing on the wrong 1%. Quite frankly, because these issues of, for example, trans competitors in sports, like that is like a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of people in this country. So the fact that Fox News is just, they just drive home this narrative. And that is the one thing that I will give credit to, is that they know how to take a message and they will not stop. They are relentless at driving it home. So, and we are the ones that are suffering because of it. And this willful ignorance, this inability to possess critical thinking skills is, quite frankly, it's not only frightening, but it's disheartening. And it tells you a lot about this, about where we're at right now, right? And so yes, we've come a long way in a lot of ways. And I think when you think of representation of people in film, I mean, I feel like now every Netflix show that I watch has some sort of queer character or storyline. And I'm like, oh, I love this, So we're in that world, we're being better represented for sure. And so I think that's what gives me hope in a lot of ways, is that we're not going away. Like our faces, our stories, our lives, they're still out there, and they're going to continue to be out there. And I think now more than ever, we need to embrace our trans brothers and sisters and give them a platform. And, it's more than just buying a Protect the Dolls t-shirt. Like, I think that we need to do a hell of a lot more, quite frankly, and find out what we can do to elevate, because they are a part of our community. It is not separate. Like, it's all of us. And so I think we need to do a hell of a lot more to just make sure that they know that they are supported and loved and embraced. But that takes effort on our part, to really do. So
thank you, Jim, so much for joining us here on The Gailey Show. The album is Explicit, available everywhere August 8th on all of the streaming platforms. You can follow him on Instagram. He's at Jim Verraros. Thank you, Jim, for joining us here on The Gailey Show.
Thank you for having me, John. It's been awesome.
We're going to close out the show with the full track of Move On from the next album. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. Up next on WCPT is Choose Views with Richard Chu on AM 950. It's the Matt McNeil Show. Until tomorrow, keep it queer, America. Enjoy now Move On from Jim's album, Explicit.
Maybe we go separate ways, baby. The time and place is getting hazy. The things we do, the things we say, it's crazy. Tell me if I'm wrong about this. Honestly, can we keep all of our promises? Back and forth, we're running round in circles yet again. How can it be wrong if we feel right about I want you to want me too. I want you to want me too. Making up and breaking through. Crazy attention in my room. One more time to end this through. One more night is up with you. I want you to want me to move on. One more night, one more day, one more night is up with you. I want you to want me to move on. Won't you get the things? Feels like such a life, I'm not bringing you with me. Such a waste of time if you're the one I had to leave. Such a bad idea if you're sleeping next to me. I want you to want me to.